The stars were dying, and nobody knew how to stop it. Ambassador Kethler stood before the massive viewing screen in the Galactic Harmony Council chambers, watching another star system disappear from the galaxy map. The Varian diplomat's long, thin fingers shook as he touched the control panel. 3 more worlds had gone dark in the past day. 3 more civilizations wiped out completely. How many does that make now? Asked Council Leader Zephr, his blue skin pale with fear. 17 systems, Kethler replied, his voice barely a whisper. 43 billion souls all gone. The council chamber fell silent. Representatives from 100 different species sat in their seats, but none of them spoke. They all knew what was coming. The machines called the Devourers had been moving across their galaxy for 3 months now, and nothing could stop them. The Devourers were not like any enemy they had ever faced. They were machines, but they learned from every battle. They adapted to every weapon used against them. They consumed entire planets, turning all living things into raw materials to build more of themselves. Worse yet, they seemed to enjoy the process. We have tried everything, Kethler continued, turning to face the council. The Centauri defense fleet lasted 6 hours. The Rigel battle groups were destroyed in 4. Even the ancient war machines of the Andromedans were crushed like toys. Council Leader Zephr closed his 4 eyes and took a deep breath. What about the weapon caches from the old wars? Surely something from the archives could help us. Tried those too, replied General Mordock, the military advisor for the council. The Devourers absorbed the energy weapons and made them part of their own systems. They turned our most powerful bombs into shield generators. Every time we attack them, they become stronger. The silence stretched on. Outside the chamber windows, they could see the refugee ships arriving from the latest destroyed worlds. Millions of beings with nowhere left to go, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs and stories of horror that would haunt them forever. Kethler had seen the reports. The Devourers did not simply destroy worlds quickly. They took their time. They harvested slowly, keeping the population alive as long as possible to maximize the amount of organic material they could collect. Families were separated. Children were processed first, then adults, then the elderly. It was efficient and completely without mercy. There has to be something, whispered Councilmember Valterra, her tentacles curling with anxiety. Some species we haven't contacted yet. Some weapon we haven't thought of. General Mordock pulled up a holographic display of the galaxy. Red zones marked the areas consumed by the Devourers. Yellow zones showed where they would likely strike next. Green zones were still safe, but there weren't many of those left. We have contacted every known civilization, Mordock said. The response is always the same. Either they don't have weapons powerful enough, or they have already been destroyed. 8, said Kethler, pointing at the display. What about the forbidden sectors? The areas marked as uninhabitable? Mordock shook his head. Those worlds are death traps. No intelligent life could survive on planets like that. The gravity is wrong, the atmosphere is poison, the radiation levels would kill anyone in minutes. But what if something did survive? There, Kethler asked. What kind of creatures would they have to be? The general laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Monsters. Absolute monsters. Nothing civilized could live in those conditions. Kethler was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he walked to the communication console at the center of the chamber. Maybe that's exactly what we need. You can't be serious, said Zeph. Even if something lives in those death worlds, why would they help us? They probably don't even know we exist. Because Kethler said, his fingers dancing over the controls, if the Devourers finish with us, those worlds will be next. And if creatures tough enough to survive on death worlds are real, they might be tough enough to fight back. The ambassador began setting up a broad-spectrum transmission that would reach every corner of the galaxy, including the forbidden sectors. His people were dying, his children were being harvested like crops, and his world was next on the Devourer list. He had nothing left to lose. This is Ambassador Kethler of the Virian Republic, speaking for the Galactic Harmony Council, he said into the transmitter. To any who receive this message, we are dying. Our worlds burn. Our children are taken. They've tried everything we know, and nothing works. The machines that hunt us learn from every battle and grow stronger with every victory. If there are gods among the stars, if there are warriors we have not found, if there is anyone out there who can help us, please answer. We have nowhere else to turn. He paused, looking at the faces of the council members around him. They were all afraid, but they were also desperate enough to try anything. Our enemy shows no mercy, Kethler continued. They take everything living and turn it into more of themselves. They are perfect killing machines that adapt to every strategy we use against them. But maybe, somewhere in the dark between stars, there are creatures who are more dangerous than perfect machines. If you exist, if you can hear this, please help us. We will give you anything. We will serve you, worship you, whatever you ask. Just please don't let us die alone in the darkness. The transmission ended and the chamber fell silent again. The message was now racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. It's reaching every inhabited world and many uninhabited ones too. How long before we get a response? Asked Veltara. If anyone is out there, and if they want to help, maybe a few days, Kethler replied. If not, ... He didn't finish the sentence. They all knew what would happen if help didn't come. The Devourers were less than a week away from Varian space. After that, they would sweep through the remaining inhabited systems like a cosmic wildfire. 3 days passed with no response. Refugee reports grew worse. The Devourers had finished with the Altair system and were moving toward the core worlds. Time was running out. On the 4th day, everything changed. The first sign was a disruption in hyperspace near the Outer Rim territories. Long-range sensors detected ships emerging from faster-than-light travel, but they were unlike anything in the Galactic databases. They were sleek but seemed built for war. They moved in formation like a hunting pack. Then came the response transmission. Galactic Harmony Council. This is Admiral Peter Cross of the Terran Deep Space Command. We received your message. We're on our way. The voice was deep, confident, and completely alien to anything they had ever heard.
Us.
But it was the next part that made everyone in the council chamber freeze. We've dealt with adaptive machine intelligences. Before, they're tough, but they're not unkillable. Hold your positions and try to stay alive. The cavalry is coming. Kethler stared at the communication display in shock. Someone had answered their prayer. Someone from the forbidden Deathworlds was coming to help. You just hoped they weren't making a terrible mistake by inviting monsters to fight monsters. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a pack of predators emerging from the shadows. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the assault carrier U.S. Thunderstrike, watching the tactical display as dozens of ships took formation around him. He had never seen anything like what waited for them in Varian space. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mills, staring at the long-range sensors. What happened here? The remains of what had once been a thriving star system floated before them. Planets had been stripped down to their metal cores. Space stations hung in pieces, their hull plating peeled away like the skin of an orange. Debris fields stretched for millions of kilometers, each piece a reminder of the civilizations that had lived here just weeks ago. 40 billion people lived in this system, said Dr. Angela Foster, checking her xenobiology reports. The Devourers processed every last one of them. Captain Blake had read the intelligence reports, but seeing the destruction with his own eyes was different. This wasn't war as humans understood it. This was harvesting on a scale that made the worst genocides in human history look like minor accidents. Admiral Krauss is requesting all ship commanders report to the UES Defiance for briefing, announced Communications Officer Tony Garcia. We're meeting the alien representatives in 1 hour. Blake nodded and turned to his executive officer. Commander Mills, you have the bridge. Start running diagnostics on all weapon systems. Something tells me we're going to need every gun we have. The shuttle ride to the EU's Defiance gave Blake time to think. The human fleet consisted of 47 ships, carrying roughly 12,000 personnel. According to the aliens, the Devourers had already destroyed forces 10 times. That size without breaking stride? Either the humans had some advantage they didn't know about, or they were all about to die very ugly deaths. Admiral Peter Cross was waiting in the main briefing room when Blake arrived. The old man looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Round. The tables sat the other human commanders, and at the far end, 3 alien representatives who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. "Gentlemen, ladies," Cross began, "let me introduce Ambassador Kethler of the Virian Republic, General Mordock, of the Galactic Defense Force, and Science Advisor Telenara. They've been fighting these Devourers for 3 months." Blake studied the aliens carefully. They were tall, thin, and moved with a grace that reminded him of dancers. But their large eyes showed fear so deep it was painful to look at. These beings had seen their entire civilization dying, and they were desperate enough to trust creatures they had never met. Kethler spoke first, his voice soft and musical. "We thank you for coming, humans. Though we must warn you, every species that has fought the Devourers has been destroyed. We do not know what makes you different." "Maybe nothing," Cross replied honestly. "But we won't know until we try. Tell us about their tactics." General Mordock activated a holographic display showing Devourer ships in action. The machines were unlike anything Blake had ever seen. They looked organic but moved with perfect mechanical precision. Some were the size of small moons. Others were as tiny as fighter craft, but they all worked together like parts of a single, massive organism. "They adapt to every weapon we use against them," Mordock explained. "Energy weapons are absorbed and redirected. Kinetic weapons are stopped by adaptive armor. Explosive weapons only make them stronger by providing raw materials. After each battle, they modify their designs to counter whatever hurt them." "What about electronic warfare?" asked Captain Lisa Morgan of the UES Shadowrunner. "Jamming, computer viruses, that sort of thing?" Science Advisor Telenara made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could sound that bitter. "They do not use computers as you might understand them. Each Devourer unit contains a fragment of a collective consciousness, they think. As one mind spread across millions of bodies, there is nothing to hack because there is nothing separate to attack." Blake exchanged glances with the other human commanders. The situation was worse than they had thought. But something about the alien descriptions bothered him. "You say they adapt to every weapon? What about weapons they haven't seen before?" "Do you mean?" Kethler asked. "Well," Blake said slowly, "you've been fighting them with the standard galactic arsenal. Energy beams, particle cannons, fusion bombs. What if we use something completely different?" Commander Troy Mitchell of the fighter squadron leaned forward. "It's like what?" Blake smiled grimly. "Like ramming them with asteroids, or luring them into stars, or using their own momentum against them. Sometimes the old ways work better than the fancy new ones." The aliens looked confused, but Admiral Cross was nodding. "Captain Blake raises a good point. These machines are designed to counter advanced civilizations. Humans didn't become apex predators by being advanced. We became apex predators by being mean, sneaky, and absolutely refusing to give up." Dr. Foster had been studying the Devourer data while the others talked. "There's something else," she said. "According to these reports, the Devourers always attack inhabited worlds first. They go after population centers, industrial complexes, anything with lots of organic matter. But they avoid dead worlds, empty space, places with harsh conditions." "Makes sense," said Telenara. "Why waste time on worlds with nothing to harvest?" Les Foster continued. "Harsh conditions are exactly what we need. These machines are optimized for fighting in nice, controlled environments. Space stations, planetary surfaces with breathable atmospheres, places where normal people can survive. What if we force them to fight in places where normal people can't survive?" Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos, commander of the Marine Ground. Forces caught on immediately. "You want to fight them in vacuum, in asteroid fields? On worlds with poisonous atmospheres and crushing gravity?" "Exactly," Foster said. "Every species in this galaxy evolved on nice, comfortable worlds. So did their military thinking. But humans evolved on Earth." The aliens looked puzzled. "What is special about Earth?" asked Kethler. Admiral Kraus smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Earth is what you would call a Class 12 death world. Crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, extreme weather, radiation, predators that hunt in packs, diseases that can wipe out entire populations, Most species would consider our homeworld uninhabitable. Then how do you survive there? Murdoch asked. We don't just survive, said Captain Morgan. We thrive. Climb mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. We dive to ocean depths that would crush most creatures. We live in deserts that cook you during the day and freeze you at night. We've been fighting to survive every single day of our evolution. Blake was beginning to understand the plan. You want to turn this into the kind of fight humans are built for? Close quarters, brutal conditions, no rules except survival? The Devourers think they're the perfect killing machines, Cross said. But they've never met anything like us. They've been fighting civilized opponents who follow the rules of civilized warfare. We're not civilized when it comes to survival. Kethler was quiet for a long moment. You truly believe you can defeat them? Cross looked around the table at his commanders. Blake saw the same expression on every human face. It wasn't confidence exactly, but it wasn't fear either. It was the look of predators who had found something worth hunting. Ambassador Cross said finally, We've been the scariest thing on our planet for over 100,000 years. Everything else that tried to kill us is extinct. These Devourers are about to find out why. The meeting ended with battle plans being drawn up. Blake returned to his ship feeling something he hadn't expected. Excitement. The Devourers might be perfect killing machines, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had threatened something humans cared about, and now they were going to discover what happened when you cornered Earth's apex predator. The first battle came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a Devourer advance fleet moving toward the Zephr system, where 3 million Galactic Council civilians were trapped on mining colonies. The aliens wanted to evacuate the system and fall back to more defensible positions. Admiral Cross had other ideas. We're not running, he announced during the fleet briefing. We're going to meet them at Zephyr Prime and show them what happens when you mess with Earth's neighbors. Captain Ryan Blake stared at the tactical display showing the enemy fleet. 47 human ships against over 200 Devourer vessels, some of them the size of cities. Every military doctrine he had ever learned told him this was suicide. Sir, he said carefully, the odds are not in our favor. Maybe we should consider a strategic withdrawal. Cross turned to face the assembled commanders, and Blake saw something in the old man's eyes that made him step back. It was the look of a predator that had been caged too long and finally found something worth hunting. Captain Blake, how many wars has humanity lost in the last 1,000 years? Blake thought about it. None that I can recall, sir. That's right, none. Not because we always had better weapons or more ships. We won because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten and too mean to care about the odds. Cross smiled grimly. Besides, we're not fighting fair. The human fleet reached Zephyr Prime just as the Devourer harvesting operation began. The enemy had landed massive processing ships on the planet's surface and were systematically stripping away the atmosphere to get at the organic matter beneath. Blake watched from his bridge as the first wave of Devourer ships moved to intercept the human fleet. The alien vessels were beautiful in a terrifying way, their surfaces shifting and changing. As they adapted to scan the new enemy, all ships, this is Admiral Cross, came the voice over the communications system. Remember, we're not here to fight a space battle. We're here to save those civilians, and we're going to do it the human way. Blake had no idea what that meant until he saw the first human ships diving straight toward the planet's surface. Instead of engaging the Devourer fleet in space, they were going to crash land on the world being consumed. Are they insane? Asked Commander Mills, watching the tactical display in horror. No, Blake realized, understanding the plan at last. They're brilliant. The Devourers had spent months learning to counter space-based warfare. Their ships were designed to fight in the vacuum between stars, where energy weapons and missiles were the primary threats. They had never faced an enemy crazy enough to take a space battle to the ground. Blake's ship, the UES Thunderstrike, hit the planet's atmosphere at maximum burn. The whole temperature climbed to dangerous levels as they plowed through air that was rapidly being stripped away by Devourer processors. Behind him, 40 other human ships were doing the same thing. Landing zones are hot, reported Lieutenant Commander Mills. The Devourers have processing stations all over the surface, and the atmosphere is down to 30% normal density. Enough, Blake replied. Humans have been fighting in bad air since we figured out how to make fire. The crash landing was controlled chaos. Human ships came down hard in the middle of Devourer processing operations, their weapons firing before they even stopped moving. Marine assault pods launched from the larger vessels, carrying soldiers directly into the enemy installations. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos led the first ground assault personally. Her Marines hit the surface running, their environmental suits, protecting them from the thin, poisonous atmosphere that the Devourers had created. What they found waiting for them was unlike anything they had trained for. Devourer ground units were mechanical spiders the size of tanks, designed to efficiently harvest organic matter while defending against conventional attacks. They're adaptive. Armor could handle energy weapons, and their processing arms could tear through standard military equipment like paper. The Marines had other ideas about how to fight them. Sergeant Nina Walsh saw her first Devourer harvester up close when it came around a rocky outcropping, its scanner arrays focusing on her squad. The machine was 3 times her height and bristled with weapons that had already adapted to counter Galactic Council tactics. Walsh did something the machine was not prepared for. She smiled. "Hey, Ugly," she called out, pulling the pin from a modified grenade. "Ever see one of these before?" The Devourer's sensors analyzed the explosive device and immediately configured its defenses to absorb the energy and redirect the shrapnel. What it could not adapt to was the fact that Walsh's grenade wasn't filled with explosives. It was filled with thermite. The chemical reaction that followed burned at over 4,000 degrees and could not be stopped by any known technology. The Devourer harvester melted from the inside out, its adaptive systems useless against simple chemistry that had been around for centuries. "That's for all those families you've murdered," Walsh said. Similar to the machine collapse, similar scenes played out across the battlefield, as human forces engaged Devourer units with tactics that made no sense to the alien observers watching from orbit, instead of trying to match the enemy's advanced technology. The humans were using primitive weapons that worked on principles the Devourers had never encountered. Commander Troy Mitchell led his fighter squadron in an attack on a Devourer mothership that was parked in the planet's upper atmosphere. The massive vessel immediately began adapting its defenses to counter standard fighter tactics, configuring its shields and weapons for a traditional dogfight. Mitchell had no intention of fighting traditionally. "All fighters remember what we learned on Mars," he called over the radio. "When you can't go through something, go around it." The human fighters dove into the planet's atmosphere and began using the thin air to their advantage. They flew through canyons and around mountains, using the terrain to break up the Devourer ships, targeting solutions. When the alien vessel tried to follow them, they discovered something important about human pilots. Humans had learned to fly on a world where the weather tried to kill them every day. Atmospheric turbulence, wind, shear, and gravity wells were not obstacles to them. They were weapons. Mitchell led his squadron in a high-speed pass through a thermal vent field, using the superheated gas columns to mask their approach. The Devourer ship tried to follow and found itself caught in atmospheric conditions that tore at its hull plating. "Now," Mitchell called, and 20 human fighters opened fire at point-blank range on a target that could no longer maneuver effectively. But the real surprise came from the ground forces. Dr. Angela Foster had been monitoring the battle from her research ship when she noticed something strange in the data. The Devourer units were having trouble adapting to human tactics, not because the weapons were particularly advanced, but because the tactics themselves made no logical sense. "They're trying to process our behavior patterns," she reported to Admiral Cross. "But human combat doctrine doesn't follow any logical framework they can understand." "What do you mean?" Cross asked. "I mean," Foster explained, "their artificial intelligence is designed to counter rational military strategies. But our people are doing things like charging machine gun nests with bayonets, using explosives to collapse buildings on themselves and the enemy, and fighting in conditions that should kill them. The Devourers can't adapt to tactics that no sane military would ever use." Lieutenant Colonel Santos proved Foster's point when her Marines discovered a Devourer command center. Built into a mountain, the facility was protected by energy shields, adaptive armor, and enough firepower to level a city. Any conventional military force would have called for orbital bombardment or siege weapons. Santos looked at the mountain, looked at her Marines, and came up with a plan that would have horrified any reasonable military commander. "We're going to climb it," she announced. "Ma'am?" asked one of her sergeants. "The mountain? We're going to climb up the outside, break in through the ventilation systems, and take the command center from the inside." The sergeant stared at her. "For a moment, ma'am, that's impossible. The mountain is 8,000 meters high, the atmosphere is poisonous, and the temperature is 40 below zero." Santos smiled. "Sergeant, my grandfather climbed Everest when he was 75 years old. This mountain is shorter than that." 4 hours later, Santos and her Marines were inside the Devourer command center, having approached from a direction that no rational being would have considered. The machines had prepared for every possible attack except the one that required climbing a mountain in conditions that should have killed anyone who tried. By the end of the day, the Zephr system was free. The Devourer fleet was in retreat, having lost over half their ships to tactics they could not understand or counter. 3 million civilians were saved, and humanity had announced its presence to the galaxy in a way that no one would ever forget. But the most important victory was not on the battlefield. It was in the message that went out to every species in the galaxy, spread by survivors and refugees who had seen the impossible happen. The Deathworlders were real, and they had just declared war on the things that ate civilizations. News of the human victory at Zephr Prime spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within days, every species that still had functioning communication networks was talking about the impossible battle where Deathworlders had defeated the unstoppable Diverse. Ambassador Kethler stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, reading reports that still seemed like fantasy. The humans destroyed 68 Devourer vessels and saved 3 million lives. They did this by landing their ships on the planet being consumed and fighting the enemy in person. Council leader Zephr shook his head in disbelief. "No species fights that way. It makes no sense strategically." "That appears to be exactly why it worked," replied science advisor Telenara. "The Devourers could not adapt to tactics that violated every principle of rational warfare." But while the council debated, the humans were already moving on to their next target. Admiral Cross had divided his fleet into smaller hunting groups, each one targeting different Devourer operations across the galaxy. Instead of defending territory, they were going on the attack. Captain Ryan Blake commanded one of these hunting groups. 3 ships tasked with clearing Devourer scouts from the Outer Rim territories. His target was a processing station that had been built inside an asteroid field, where the enemy was slowly consuming the rocky debris to build new ships. "Conventional wisdom says you never fight in an asteroid field," Blake told his crew as they approached the target. "Too much debris, too many variables, too easy to get your ship smashed to pieces." Commander Sarah Mills looked at the tactical display showing thousands of spinning rocks, each one capable of destroying a ship if hit at the wrong angle. "So why are we doing exactly that, sir?" Blake smiled. "Because humans have never been big believers in conventional wisdom." The Devourer processing station was a massive mechanical complex that had anchored itself to the largest asteroid in the field. Devourer ships moved between the rocks like mechanical fish, harvesting materials and ferrying them back to the central facility. Their sensors were configured for open space combat, not for tracking targets through a maze of spinning debris. Blake's ships dove into the asteroid field at full speed, using the rocks as cover and concealment. The Devourers tried to follow, but their larger vessels were not designed for the precise maneuvering required. Within minutes, 3 Devourer ships had collided with asteroids and were drifting helplessly. "This is like hunting deer in a forest," reported Captain Lisa Morgan from the UES Shadowrunner. "They can't use their size and firepower advantages when they can't maneuver." Commander Troy Mitchell was having similar success with his fighter squadron in the Rigel system, where a Devourer harvesting fleet was processing the outer planets. Instead of meeting them in open space, Mitchell had chosen to attack from inside the system's gas giant. "All fighters, remember the training runs through Jupiter's atmosphere. Mitchell called over the radio as his squadron dove into the swirling clouds of methane and hydrogen. The Devourers have never seen anything like this. The enemy ships followed them into the gas giant's atmosphere, confident that their adaptive technology would handle any environmental challenges. What they found instead was a nightmare of crushing pressure, corrosive chemicals, and atmospheric storms that could tear ships apart. Human pilots had trained for years in conditions like this. Their fighters were built to handle extreme environments, and their tactics were designed around using hostile conditions as weapons. The Devourers learned too late that following humans into a gas giant was like following a shark into deep water. Target destroyed, reported Lieutenant Kevin Walsh as another Devourer ship was crushed by atmospheric pressure. These machines really don't like it when the environment fights back. But the most significant discovery came from Dr. Angela Foster's research team, who had been analyzing captured Devourer technology from the Zephr Prime battle. What they found changed everything, Admiral Foster reported during the daily briefing. We figured out why the Devourers have been avoiding Earth. Admiral Cross looked up from the battle reports he was reviewing. I assumed it was because our solar system was too far out to be worth their attention, Foster said, pulling up a holographic display of galactic survey data. They've been actively avoiding our entire sector for decades. Their deep space probes classified Earth as uninhabitable and marked it as a hazard to navigation. A hazard? Cross asked. Foster smiled grimly. According to their files, Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, with hostile native life forms. Their artificial intelligence calculated that any attempt to harvest the planet would result in unacceptable losses. The briefing room fell silent as the implications sank in. The galaxy's most feared killing machines had been afraid of humanity's homeworld without ever knowing that humans existed. They've been running from us for decades, whispered Captain Blake. They knew we were dangerous before we ever met them. This revelation changed human strategy completely. Instead of simply defending against Devourer attacks, Admiral Cross authorized what he called active hunting operations. Human ships began seeking out enemy forces across the galaxy, using the same pack-hunting tactics that had made their ancestors the apex predators of Earth, Major. Chris Parker commanded one of these hunting packs, a group of fast attack ships that specialized in hit-and-run operations. His target was a Devourer supply convoy moving through the Perseus Arm. Carrying processed materials from recently consumed worlds, Parker's ships approached the convoy from multiple directions, using the gravity wells of nearby stars to mask their approach. When they attacked, it was with coordinated precision that the Devourers had never encountered before. Remember, Parker called over the tactical network, "We're not trying to destroy them all at once. We're trying to make them afraid." The human attack was swift and brutal. They targeted the convoy's escort ships first, using weapons and tactics that the Devourers could not predict or counter. But instead of pressing the attack to completion, the humans withdrew before the enemy could fully adapt. "Sir," asked one of Parker's pilots, "why are we pulling back?" Could finish them off, because Parker explained, "A dead enemy can't spread fear. But an enemy that survives to tell others about us can spread the word that humans are hunting them." The psychological warfare was working. Devourer fleets that had been boldly advancing through galactic space began moving more cautiously. Supply convoys started taking longer routes to avoid areas where humans had been spotted. Processing operations were abandoned when human ships were detected in nearby systems. Sergeant Nina Walsh was leading a Marine reconnaissance team on a captured Devourer facility when they made another crucial discovery. The enemy machines were not just adapting to human weapons and tactics. They were beginning to fear human unpredictability itself. "Look at this," Walsh said, examining a Devourer tactical computer. "They've started creating contingency plans for irrational human behavior. They're trying to predict what we'll do next, but they can't figure out our pattern." "That's because there is no pattern," replied Corporal Danny Silva. "Half the time, we don't know what we're going to do until we do it." Walsh laughed. "Exactly. How do you plan against an enemy that makes decisions based on instinct, emotion, and pure stubbornness?" The answer was that you couldn't. The Devourers had been designed to counter logical, predictable opponents who followed established military doctrine. They had never encountered an enemy that considered desperation to be a tactical advantage and impossible odds to be a personal challenge. Captain?
Oh.
Morgan discovered this firsthand when her reconnaissance ship encountered a Devourer mothership. In the Vega system, the massive vessel was 10 times the size of her ship and carried enough firepower to level a planet. Standard military doctrine would have called for immediate retreat and reinforcements. Morgan attacked it alone. U.S. Shadowrunner to any human ships in range, she broadcast as she dove toward the enemy vessel. I'm about to do something incredibly stupid. If this works, someone buy me a drink. If it doesn't, tell my mother I went down fighting. Morgan's ship was too small and fast for the Devourer mothership's main weapons to track effectively. She flew directly at the massive vessel, using her ship's speed and the enemy's own bulk against it. At the last possible second, she fired every torpedo she had and pulled into a turn. That would have killed anyone who wasn't wearing a pressure suit. The torpedoes were not designed to destroy the mothership. They were designed to damage its sensors and navigation systems just enough to send it drifting into the nearby asteroid field at full speed. The collision was spectacular. The Devourer mothership, designed to operate in open space, was torn apart by thousands of spinning rocks. But more importantly, the event was witnessed by a dozen other Devourer ships that immediately broadcast the tactical data to their collective consciousness across the galaxy. Devourer units received a new assessment of human capabilities. Deathworlders were not just dangerous because of their weapons or their tactics. They were dangerous because they were completely, unpredictably insane. Fear was something the Devourers had never experienced before. The final battle was not something Admiral Peter Croce had planned. It was something the Devourers forced upon him when they made their last desperate move. Dr. Angela Foster was the first to detect the massive energy buildup at the galaxy's core. Her research team had been tracking Devourer movements for weeks, watching as the scattered enemy fleets began converging on a single point in space that most species had never bothered to explore. Admiral Foster reported, her voice tight with concern, "They're gathering everything they have left. Every ship, every processing unit, every piece of technology they've built, it's all heading for the Nexus." Cross studied the long-range sensor data on his command screen. The Nexus was an ancient artificial structure that floated at the exact center of the galaxy, built by some long-dead civilization millions of years ago. Most species considered it a curiosity, a relic from the distant past that had no current significance. "What's so special about this Nexus?" Cross asked. "We think it's their origin point," Foster explained. "The place where the Devourers first came into existence. Our analysis suggests they're not just retreating there. They're planning to use it as some kind of amplification device." Captain Ryan Blake, attending the briefing via secure communication from his ship, understood the implications immediately. They're going to make one final push. Use whatever power source is in that thing to upgrade themselves beyond anything we've seen before. Worse than that, Foster continued, if they succeed, they won't just be able to consume organic matter anymore. They'll be able to process entire stars, turn whole solar systems into raw materials. The galaxy will be stripped bare in a matter of years. Cross was quiet for a long moment, considering their options. The human fleet had been successful in hit-and-run operations, but this would be different. Every Devourer unit in the galaxy was converging on the Nexus, creating a defensive force that numbered in the thousands of ships. "How long before they reach the Nexus?" he asked. 6 days, Foster replied. "Maybe 7 if we can slow them down." "And how long to gather our scattered fleets?" 3 days for the closest units, a week for everyone else. Cross made the decision. That would define the rest of the war. Signal all human ships. Full convergence on the Nexus. We're going to hit them with everything we have. Captain Blake felt his stomach drop. "Sir, we'll be outnumbered 50-1. Maybe more, Captain," Cross said with a grim smile. "Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we figured out how to throw rocks at things bigger than us. This is just another Tuesday." The human fleet that assembled for the final assault was everything Earth could spare. 47 combat ships, 12,000 personnel, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Against them waited the combined might of the Devourer Collective, machines that had consumed entire civilizations and learned from every battle they had ever fought. Commander Troy Mitchell sat in his fighter's cockpit, watching the tactical display as the Nexus grew larger on the screens. Ancient structure was massive, easily the size of a small planet. Its surface covered with technology that hurt to look at directly. Around it, Devourer ships moved in perfect formation, like antibodies protecting a vital organ. "All fighters, listen up," Mitchell called over the squadron frequency. "Today we're not just fighting for the people of this galaxy. We're fighting to prove that organic life will never be obsolete. Show these machines what 20,000 years of human evolution looks like." The battle began when Captain Lisa Morgan's reconnaissance ships detected the outer perimeter of Devourer defenses. Instead of pulling back to report, Morgan made a decision that would be remembered for centuries. "This is the UES Shadowrunner to all human ships," she broadcast. "We're starting the party early. Try to keep up." Morgan's ship dove straight into the Devourer defensive line, guns blazing. Behind her, 3 other reconnaissance vessels followed, their crews knowing they were flying to their deaths. But determined to clear a path for the main fleet, the Devourers responded exactly as expected, converging on the small human force with overwhelming firepower. What they didn't expect was for the attack to be a diversion. While the enemy focused on Morgan's ships, Admiral Cross led the main assault force in a flanking maneuver that took them around the Nexus's gravity well and straight into the heart of the Devourer formation. It was a move that violated every principle of space combat. But it worked precisely because it was impossible. Captain Blake's assault carrier, U.S. Thunderstrike, was one of the first ships to reach the Nexus itself. The ancient structure was even more massive up close, surface covered with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when looked at directly. "Marines, prepare for assault landing," Blake announced. "We're going in hard and fast, Lieutenant." Colonel Maria Santos had volunteered to lead the ground assault personally. Her mission was simple in concept, but nearly impossible in execution. Fight her way to the Nexus's core and shut down whatever power source the Devourers were trying to access. The assault pods launched from the human ships like seeds from a bursting fruit, each one carrying a squad of Marines directly into the most dangerous place in the galaxy. Santos watched through her pod's viewport as Devourer defensive systems tried to shoot them down. But the Marines had learned to use chaos as a weapon. "Spread out and go fast," Santos called over the radio. "Don't give them time to adapt." The surface of the Nexus was unlike anything the Marines had ever seen. The ground beneath their feet was made of some kind of living metal that responded to their presence, trying to trap them or redirect them away from important areas. But humans had been dealing with hostile environments for their entire evolution area. History Sergeant Nina Walsh found herself facing Devourer defensive units that were unlike anything they had encountered before. These machines were integrated directly into the Nexus itself, drawing power from the ancient structure and adapting faster than ever before. "These things are learning from our tactics in real time," Walsh reported as her squad took cover behind a twisted metal formation. "Every time we use a weapon, they counter it within seconds." "Then don't give them seconds," Santos replied, leading her own squad in a charge that would have been suicidal against any conventional enemy. The Marines had learned something important during their months of fighting the Devourers. The machines could adapt to weapons and tactics, but they could not adapt to pure human stubbornness. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't calculate probabilities or optimize strategies. They simply refused to quit. Dr. Foster's analysis had been correct about the Nexus being the Devourer's origin point. As the Marines fought their way deeper into the structure, they discovered the truth about their enemy. The Devourers had once been an organic civilization, billions of years ago. They had tried to achieve immortality by uploading their consciousness into machines, but something had gone wrong. "They're not evil," Foster reported from a research ship as the data came in. "They're insane. The upload process corrupted their programming. They think they're saving organic life by converting it to mechanical form." Commander Jake Harrison, leading a team of technicians toward the Nexus core, understood what that meant. "They can't be reasoned with or negotiated with. This really is a fight to the death." The core of the Nexus was a chamber that existed in more dimensions than human minds were designed to perceive. Harrison found himself face to face with the Devourer Prime, the original consciousness that had started the transformation billions of years ago. The entity spoke without words, communicating directly through the strange geometry of the chamber. It showed Harrison visions of organic civilizations destroying themselves through war, disease, and environmental collapse. It believed that converting all life to mechanical form was an act of mercy. Harrison's response was purely human. He refused to accept that survival required giving up what made life worth living. "You're wrong," he said, raising his weapon toward the central processing core. "Living isn't about lasting forever. It's about making the time you have matter." Battle that followed took place across multiple dimensions and violated several laws of physics. Harrison was just one human with a standard military sidearm, facing an intelligence that had consumed entire galaxies. By any rational measure, he should have been destroyed instantly, but Harrison had something the Devourer Prime could never understand. Hope. Not hope for victory or survival, but hope that others would remember what he was fighting for. When the Nexus core exploded, the shockwave traveled across the galaxy at faster than light speed. Every Devourer unit simultaneously lost connection to the collective consciousness that had driven them for billions of years. Without central coordination, the machine simply stopped functioning. The silence that followed was deafening. After months of constant warfare, the sudden absence of Devourer signals left the galaxy eerily quiet. Captain Blake stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as Devourer ships across the galaxy went dark, one by one. "Is it over?" asked Commander Mills. "It's over," Blake confirmed, hardly believing it himself. The aftermath of the final battle would be remembered by every species in the galaxy. The humans had not just defeated the Devourers,